Welcome again to Muslim Apologetics Australia. So as you know, I made a video called Mandatory Hijab Laws in Iran, Muslim Response. I did get a few questions raised by some Muslims and also some critics of Islam, and I thought I'll make a part 2 to address those questions. Some of them have already been addressed, but we'll go into further detail. So a brother called Abit Khan mentions, Assalamu alaikum, brother, I completely agree with you, but it is still not okay for the Iranian moral police to beat a woman to death just because she wore a hijab in a wrong way, which is why the Iranian people's reaction is expected to end up this way. But unfortunately, as most people know, Western media has a double standard like many liberalists and secularists. If you actually watched my video, I actually condemned the killing, if there were specific killings of women who don't wear the hijab. My understanding is there were no had punishments where they have a particular date and then there's an execution. And I made that very clear in the video. What we are finding is that they claim that there are police brutalities in custody. And if that is the case, it is unfortunate. But I wrote a lengthy response to the brother, and please listen. I said, many people die in police custody. Black people also die in the hands of police custody. Do you think white racists care about the death of blacks under police brutality? Nope. They even made videos mocking the death of black people who die under police custody by making funny memes. I can't breathe. Why? Because they say he was resisting arrest and he was a criminal with a history. If a French Muslim woman died in the hands of police custody for refusing to remove her hijab, the West would be on the side of the police and say, it's the Muslim woman's fault for not following the French legal system. The Islamophobes would all laugh at this Muslim woman's death. Regardless if this Iranian woman died or did not die, they would still be against the Iranian government. Their problem isn't really about the death of the Iranian woman. They don't even care about her. They act as if they care, but they don't. What they are concerned about is the mandatory hijab, which is a symbol of the Islamic law that they have a problem with. That's why they have been trying to remove it all over the West and within Muslim nations. If these people cared about women's rights, they would be over in France protesting, lighting fires and burning the French flag. They only seem to care about women if they are westernized and they hate Islam and the hijab. Muslim women are killed every day under Israeli brutality, but it doesn't even make the news. Why? So these, excuse me for my language, bastards don't even care about Muslim women. They only care if these Muslim women die honoring Western culture and liberal values. A Jewish critic, I guess he's from Israel, he writes, he says, I agree that there is hypocrisy about France's burqa laws. True, Muslim women in France should protest and struggle for their rights. But here is the question, why is it just Muslim women? Why isn't the feminist, the ones that, love protesting against Muslim and Islam, where are those feminist liberals also? Why aren't you telling them to also protest in France? Why is it just the Muslim women who have to protest? So it says, Muslim women in France should protest and struggle for their rights. I will not actively support them because I despise religious practices as barbaric, be it Muslim, Jewish or Catholic. That's my personal opinion. But you notice the double standards here. So he's up for human rights. He's up for people's choices and demanding freedoms, but he himself does not support or will not actively support where a Muslim woman wants to cover her face. So notice the hypocrisy here from this Jew. He says, that's my personal opinion. He says, still, I believe Muslim women have the right to wear whatever they want. Okay. He says in Iran, and notice he's saying this because there's a bit of a hypocrisy because, if we don't give Muslim women rights, how are we going to get our rights? Anyway, let's continue. He says, still I believe Muslim women have the right to wear whatever they want. He says, in Iran, the uprising is not about the hijab, and Mahsa case was just a trigger. In Iran, there are numerous problems with human rights, security, economics, etc. We in the West are biased and we support struggle for values that we believe in, just the way Muslims support their values and cause. He says the Palestinian struggle against Israel or building masjids all over the world, etc. And although there are interests and hypocrisies on both sides, one absolutely cannot compare what is going on in the Muslim societies and in Western ones in terms of human rights. For some reason, you yourself prefer living in Australia and not with Mr. Erdogan, I think that's what he's saying, and not under our Taliban friend. So this is always the case. It's like a straw man, right? Oh, you must live in the West and you shouldn't be criticizing the West because you live in the West. I mean, this sticking point is just ludicrous because why isn't the same argument made for all the Iranians? Why are all the Iranian feminists living in Iran if they hate Iran so much or if they're displeased with Iran? Why aren't you telling them to also leave and go to the West? Just like you tell me to go live among Erdogan and why I choose to live in Australia. Let's continue with the response. Though the hypocrisy, remember he said he only pointed at France. He disagrees with France being hypocritical. I said, though the hypocrisy isn't just with France, I have pointed out that mandatory clothing exists in many things outside religion, such as a dress code for your workplaces, and even generally decent clothing in public secular society where certain body parts are not permissible to reveal, such as a woman's nipples or a man exposing himself in public, whether he needs to urinate, for example. We have strict measures, for example, in Australia. I work, for example, in the security industry, and we have mandatory dress codes. I can't simply just turn up to work one day and under my own freedom of choices wear what I want. So if workplaces can have mandatory dress code, why we have problems when a religious country sets a dress code and say, well, people shouldn't be compelled to follow such laws? Well, I agree, they don't. And if that's the case, then leave the country, go somewhere else. Something they tell Muslims, if they disagree to certain Western laws that's not in favor of Muslims, like the case, for example, polygamous marriages, which is outlawed in Australia, then go to another Muslim country. Go to a Muslim country where it's acceptable. Everyone respects those laws and no one questions mandatory clothing imposed by secular law. We only talk about freedom of choice when it comes to religion. Why is that so? The double standards are everywhere, not just France. So this Yahud writes, Islamophobes exist, that's true. I myself look like a typical Muslim Middle Easterner and I encounter Islamophobia against myself. Often when people think I'm a Muslim, I do not deny it out of solidarity with my fellow immigrants who suffer much more than myself, a Jewish guy with Israeli passport. I know very well that you are talking about. Still, Iran is way too much. You won't be beaten or up or jailed in Western countries for a song for being gay, for writing an article. Double standards exist in Muslim societies too. Most Muslims support Palestinians as their Muslim brothers. However, when Turks kill Kurds or Tajaks kill Kyrgyz or Arabs kill each other, nobody seems to care. And to be honest, I don't see it as hypocrisy. We are human and we have our own interests and values. Struggles against religious practices, especially false ones, is something that I support. If you want to support mandatory hijab, that's your right, if of course. Let us first address his point about Muslims. There's a double standards because Muslims support the Palestinians killing Jews, but then the same Muslims don't support the Kurds killing Turks over Turkey and stuff like that. That isn't really a double standards. Muslims obviously going to support the believers. The Kurdish party, the PKK, they're more secular and atheist and liberal and feminist. So I don't know how you made a parallel comparison between the two. So yeah, that puts that argument to bed. Thank you again for the respectful dialogue. Though I agreed with a lot of what you said, there are things that I object to. And this is a sticking point. They always use this point, right? And this is an easy way to refute this. He says, he basically said, you wrote, you won't be jailed in the West for a song, for being gay, for writing an article. My response, does that include writing an article in an ISIS or Al-Qaeda magazine? Does that include writing a book to expose government secret files like Julian Assange? Of course, your immediate response would be that secular systems prison those who threaten national security, therefore it's rationally justifiable. But I can then argue from a theological standard that LGBTIQ promotion and rights threaten and endanger people's salvation in the afterlife, since we believe these actions can result in unbelief and endanger people's afterlife with punishment. Therefore, it's in the best interest to punish homosexuals so that they don't spread their ideas as a normality. Therefore, Iran has every right to punish those who act not according to God's morals commandments, to safeguard the rest of the community. The same way you may try and stop and ban people from writing ISIS propaganda material that could brainwash and influence young and naive-minded Muslims to go out and carry and commit atrocities. You're a smart guy, my friend, but if you look a little deeper, you will find that it's just a flip of the coin, and you see similar things done by the Westerners. I can almost guarantee that if a Muslim broke niqab rules like multiple times in France or any other moral issue contrary to the laws found in the West, such as the legal age to get married earlier, for example, in Australia, a Muslim cleric married a 34-year-old man to a 14-year-old girl in Australia, and the cleric was jailed because the legal requirement is only 18. So if Muslims continue breaking such rules, when fines do not deter, they will resort to jail, as they did with this case regarding this young marriage. And of course, you might say, it's pedophilia, he was supporting pedophilia. Well, young marriages are accepted in other parts of Europe. In United Kingdom, it's 16. In Mexico, it's something like 14 or 15. Of course, you may say, well, this is unacceptable in most parts of the West. So you see, just as things are unacceptable in most Western cultures, and you can go to jail for it, then Muslims also have every right to have their separate morals and beliefs. And they too can jail anyone who disagrees with their moral standards. Now, if you disagree, it's simple. Go live somewhere else. But the problem is the West in particular reminds me of the jihadi groups. how they can't just sit there and accept differences. Now what they do is force their beliefs and ideologies through colonial-type expansionism. First, it's if you don't change and conform with the way we think, then we'll send you sanctions and boycotts. If that doesn't work, then we'll send in NGOs to work on foot, set parallel Western governments within Muslim governments to try and change the laws. If that also fails, then they make an excuse like they need to bring down a dictator, because he's stockpiling all these nuclear weapons. So they send in warplanes, tanks, soldiers, and bomb that place back into the Stone Age, for that nation to then cripple at the knees and make themselves subservient to Western morals and demands. This is how it goes under a secular dictatorship that is now no different from the countries that you accuse for being a dictator or an oppressor towards other differences.